Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I don't know where you are in the world. Just been doing the sound check. Looking forward to catching up with you in the comments. If you've got any questions, any things that you want to ask me, I'm going to be with you all day during this summit. My name is Stephen Sansino, if you don't know who I am. I wanted to just see if Hugh is there. Hugh is in Australia, I think, and is watching this to put him to sleep. That's not a good message, Hugh. Never mind, we'll talk about that separately. Just wanted to let you know that if you need more help on writing a book or you're thinking of writing a book, then you can go to our podcast at Authors Channel. You can search for it on iTunes. You can find it there. You can also go to our website, authors.fm. The podcast is also hosted there, together with a ton of other resources. If you specifically want some tools, though, to help you write your book, then you can go to youshouldwriteabook.co.uk. That's going to be the home of our new book called Cunningly, You Should Write a Book. So you can go there. There's also a blueprint, a checklist that'll help you write your book. There's a software app. There's a whole bunch of additional resources. It's really great to be here and to be with you. Those of you who are here live now and those of you watching this on the replay wondering what on earth is going on. This project has been pretty much 5 years in the making. The first interview I made was with Marshall Goldsmith, and you'll see that tomorrow. So come back tomorrow to see that interview with him. And it really sparked a huge interest in me and my wife, Jacqueline. How do people write books? And more even than how people write books, why do people write books? Because there's an immense number of reasons why people write books. And I thought I would just sketch some of those out for you while we're waiting for everybody to come into the chat room. And your book can do far more than you imagine. You know, one of the things that you'll learn when we get into Lynda Gratton's interview shortly is that a book can help develop your thought leadership. We'll talk with VERNE HARNISH in a little while. A book can attract new clients. It can help people to find you. It's also a showcase, and that's what the Marshall Goldsmith interview will show you tomorrow. It's a book is a real showcase. It can help you demonstrate your expertise, the systems that you have. It's also a platform for you, for your business. It can help you become even more visible among the communities that you care about, among the communities that you serve. It can help you to generate some revenues, not specifically from the sales of the book, mind you, because it's very unlikely that you're going to sell hundreds of thousands or even millions of copies. That's unrealistic. Let's say that now. But writing a book can generate revenues because you can use the book as a platform, as a springboard to promote, to describe the services that you have, the products that you have. And when we get into the interview with Rob Moore at the end of today, the end of day one, he'll share with you how he writes books to create completely new income streams. It's an amazing interview, and I hope, Hugh, that you can stay awake long enough for that. But you can watch it on the replay. I won't mention it to anybody. A book is a fantastic way to build your authority and credibility. There's a lot of people using the internet, using the web right now to create PDFs, short, viral memes, ideas that, yes, if we share this short thing, people will spread it around. That's not working. That's just not working. If it ever did, there are a few wonderful examples of things that go viral that people share, and Seth Godin is one of those people, and maybe we'll talk about him later on. But a book, a lengthy book, an argument, you're describing the journey, the thought processes that you are wanting to take your reader on. That is a brilliant way to build your credibility and authority. And tomorrow we'll have an interview with Peter Larange, the former Dean of IMD Business School in Lausanne in Switzerland. And he will share with you how he uses books not only to build and develop his thought leadership, but actually to help him develop his thinking. He said he learns while he writes his books. And I think that's a fantastic thing to think about. Writing a book is also for you. It's for you to help you think, this is what I believe. This is what I think. And we'll touch on that as well with Lynda in a few minutes. And I suppose ultimately the book will raise your profile. And that, I think, is it's a two-edged sword. let me see if I can dig this book out over here. Management Gurus. I'm in the leadership and management space, and Andrei Huksinski wrote this book 30, 40 years ago called Management Gurus. And now I think thought leaders carries the same pejorative tone. People don't like to be known as or thought of as gurus. Well, or do they? When we hear Marshall Goldsmith tomorrow, you'll hear what he has to say about gurus. I think thought leaders, gurus, call yourself what you will. If you are a thought leader, if you've got a message to share, you should seriously consider writing a book. And in the course of this next 2 days, this next 14 separate interviews I want to share with you, you'll learn why. This is specifically a why-to summit, not a how-to summit. The how-to technology seems to change so rapidly that it would be foolish to do a how-to summit. But, you know, I hope these 14 people that I've interviewed over the past year, really, are an inspiring and a practical guide. Because make no mistake, you really should write a book. I think if you're looking for things to do, we can't ignore coronavirus and this terrible time that we're living through at the moment. And a book I've been revisiting recently is this one by Thomas Friedman, Thank You for Being Late. And it's an optimist's guide to thriving in the age of accelerations. And it was written shortly after the last crisis in 10 something years ago. And I want to just read this section to you because he talks about when there's change in the pace of change, well, all bets are off. He says, when there's a change in the pace of change in so many realms at once, as we're now experiencing, and this was 10 years ago, it's easy to get overwhelmed by it all. John E. Kelly, IBM's senior vice president, once observed to me, we live as human beings in a linear world where distance, time, and velocity are linear. But the growth of technology today is on an exponential curve. And the only exponential that we ever experience as humans is when something is accelerating or decelerating really suddenly with a hard braking. And when that happens, you feel very uncertain and uncomfortable for short periods of time. Such an experience can be exhilarating. Wow, I just went from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 5 seconds. But you wouldn't want to take a long trip like that. The feeling being engendered now among a lot of people is that of always being in this state of acceleration. And he says this, in such a time, opting to pause and reflect rather than to panic and withdraw is a necessity. It's not a luxury or a distraction. It's a way to increase the odds that you'll better understand and engage productively with the world around you. And he talks about the title of the book, Thank You for Being Late, and how somebody, when he rocked up at a particular meeting, said, oh, I'm sorry I'm late, the tube was late, the subway was late, my kids were ill. He said, it doesn't matter. You gave me time to think. So thank you for being late. And I think that's what, to some extent, the coronavirus pandemic has given us all. It's given us time to think and time to slow down. And that makes this an ideal time to think about writing a book. Let's just check in with the time. We have a couple of minutes to go. Let me just see. Yep, Hugh, you're here. Glad to see you here. Thank you so much. I'm pleased that the comments are working, which is fantastic news. If you have any questions, please add them here as we go through the day. And I think people will be rolling in over the course of the day, checking in and checking out. And that's absolutely fine. But I want you to be thinking, if you're watching this on the replay, whenever it is, wherever it is, I hope that you have the opportunity to pull yourself together to think through some of the things that you want to achieve in your life. A question I put to people on the workshops that I run is your best work behind you? Or is your best work still to come? If your best work is behind you, then we should all just pack up and go home. Or actually, we already are packed up and gone home. But if your best work is still to come, then there is everything to play for and everything to put in place. So this morning, over the next few sessions, we've got LYNDA GRATTON coming up very, very shortly on how books develop your thought leadership. In about an hour's time, we'll have VERNE HARNISH looking at how your books can actually attract new clients. Then at 11, we'll have Dom Moorhouse, how books help you to pivot and serve a new community. Dom built and sold his management consultancy to BT in the space of just 5 years. It's an incredible story. I hope you can stick around for that, Hugh, but I'm sorry to be taking the mickey, my friend, but you know how it is. At 12, we'll talk to Tommy Weir, who's a scientist in residence at MIT and a friend of long standing on how books position your products and services. So let me just do a final sound check while the new session begins. I will talk to you in about a minute. This is copyright-free music that I'll be playing during the day. My watch is playing, I think. I'll get my glasses. Welcome to my session, my interview with Professor Lynda Gratton at London Business School. I first met Lynda a long time ago when I was actually still at Cranfield and she was leading a research project. But I'll tell you about that in a minute in my intro to Lynda. I think the thing you might know about Lynda Gratton is her extremely successful book, The 100-Year Life, which it's an incredible success story, living and working in an age of longevity. But what's astonished me, and you'll find this in a minute, is that Lynda writes her books at the end of her research and to capture the stories and the ideas that she's built and developed. And really, she's done with the book then. So to her, at that stage, a book is an end in itself. And I have a strong feeling that a book should be a means to an end. A book should help you to achieve something. But Lynda has a completely opposite idea to that. Let me introduce you to Professor Lynda Gratton. We're speaking in one of the boardrooms at London Business School, and there is a helicopter overhead. I kid you not, you could not plan this any worse. There's a helicopter right overhead. It sounds a little bit like air conditioning. I've done a little bit of treatment of the sound. So here is Professor Lynda Gratton. If you have any questions, jot them down. I'm going to be here throughout with you, and I'll catch up with you at the end and see what you think. All right, let me see if I can make this work. Lynda Gratton, we first met, and I don't know if you remember this, but you broke your toe.
Did I?
Yes, it was at Cranfield. We were at Cranfield's School of Management, and you were coming to do a leading edge consortium chat with Veronica Hope-Haley.
Yes.
Promoting the Strategic Human Resources Management book, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
That was a while ago now, and since then you've built up 8, 9 full books. You've got another one coming out, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I want to take you back, solid academic research-based background. And then I think the thing that I remember most, that was most exciting to me as a new prof in this area, living strategy. Mm-hmm. And it was written in a way, and people, there are reviews on Amazon even now that say this is one of the most easy to read, and yet dealing with heavy issues. But I want to take you back to just even before that. Why write a book? I mean, you're a professor. You're probably the world's preeminent human resources, transformational, people strategies professor. And why write a book? Surely you didn't need to.
Well, I mean, thank you for those very kind words. I love writing, and I didn't really realize that. Well, I did. I loved writing my PhD, and actually, it was an interesting PhD and quite complicated, and I'd enjoyed that. I'd enjoyed writing my thesis for my undergraduate degree as well. And so I realized that one of the things I love to do in my life is to write, and I use writing really in part as a way of thinking. So and actually it's interesting, if I'm at a meeting or at a seminar, I always take a lot of notes. I mean, writing and looking at my writing is the way that I think. So it was a natural thing. And then when I started, and the first book was a co-authored book, so it didn't particularly have my voice in it. But Living Strategy was my first book with my own voice, and I just loved writing it. It's very hard to write a book, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But I just loved writing, and I write a lot. As you say, I mean, I've now finished my 10th book, so that's a lot. That's a lot of words.
Let me push you on this just a little, because you love to write, you write to think. Absolutely get that. But why a book? And I think it was with FT Prentice Hall at the time. How did they notice? Did you approach them? How did that work? That initial.
Actually, I can't remember how Living Strategy got off the ground. There wasn't any big process. I mean, since then, because my books have become more important, I've had agents and so on and so forth. But it seemed at that stage a pretty easy process, actually. I don't even remember how I got to FT Prentice Hall, and certainly I didn't get paid very much for it, that's for sure.
I understand that. I think if from the timing, FT had just made their arrangements with Prentice Hall. Prentice Hall had been there for ages, so I think FT were very proactive in looking for people at that time. My guess is because you spoke at FT conferences.
I did, and it's an interesting question, and I don't know the story of that. I don't know the story of Living Strategy. What I knew is that when I wrote it, Sumantra Ghoshal, who I was working with at the moment, who's a great writer and, of course, who's since passed away, looked at the manuscript and he said to me, "This is a really good book." And that was a good feeling to know that I've done that. And actually, funnily enough, Living Strategy, people still say to me, "Why don't you rewrite Living Strategy? Why don't you go back and write it again?" And I've never really had the time to do that because I've been trying to explore other things. But maybe at some stage I'll go back and rewrite Living Strategy. Yeah,
I think certainly that world, and this is a content conversation really, could do with revisiting. And it'll probably be a complete rewrite. It won't be.
I think it might. Which is probably why I don't want to do it.
And maybe a democratic enterprise seemed to be an extension of your thinking. But how was that different in your memory?
Well, Living Strategy, the way that I do my research is through consortia, and thank you for remembering the leading edge. I'd almost forgotten about that. And so the Leading Edge Consortium led to the basic research that was then described in Living Strategy. And then I wanted to explore that a bit more in terms of what should organizations be thinking about. And I wrote The Democratic Enterprise. The Democratic Enterprise was pretty much a Marmite sort of book. Didn't sell very well. In fact, I think it's out of print now, which is a shame. Some people really loved it. I mean, some people still would say this is my best ever book. It didn't go anywhere. Nobody read it.
I have an observation on that, and I think it's that word democratic in the title.
Was it? That's
my take, because the material, as you say, it goes deeper and further, and it's much more around collaboration and making it work. And I wonder if there are some people who still don't think companies
should be democratic. I haven't looked at it for so long. I've actually sort of forgotten. I mean, I don't have quite the same attitude to my children, but certainly once I've written a book, I don't look at it again. And funnily enough, Andrew Scott and I were just talking today because we've finished our new book, and I have not been able to open it. I mean, I worked on it flat out for 2 years. We sent it to the editor a week ago. I mean, it's still going through an editorial process. I haven't been able to open it. I've done everything I could not to open it again. So I haven't actually looked at the Democratic Enterprise for ages. But I should do that. I should also draw your attention to the covers. You know, the covers of a book, as those of you who've written books know, is very interesting. And I really liked the covers of Living Strategy. And you see how we'd used some of the same motif. And then I went through a red phase, as you can see, and everything had to be red.
So if you're listening in black and white,
yes, exactly.
Living Strategy has a sort of a flower motif growing and living. Good idea. Democratic Enterprise has a huge dandelion on the cover, and so if you blow that, the seeds will spread everywhere. So I love that idea.
Yeah,
those
I
ideas.
love that.
And the colour, the themes, very much the same.
They were some of my favourite, but they're not. You know, marketeers don't like them because they're grey, and marketeers like red, which is why my books then suddenly went red. So the Democratic Enterprise, I mean, the thing is, I write easily, and that's not to say it's not a difficult job. Having just finished our next book, oh my God, it is such a difficult job. And at the end of it, I said to all my children, if I ever say I want to write a book again, could you just give me the letter I've just written to myself, which simply says, do not do it. But even then, I'm saying this week, maybe I should be right.
So anyway, the Steve Redgrave of
I just can't stop
management and leadership.
But actually, people who write, and Dave Ulrich, who's a great friend of mine, who also works in the same field, he writes a lot. I mean, he writes a great deal more than I do.
Yes.
Once you get into the habit of writing, it's quite difficult to stop. I'm hoping I can stop, because I have a feeling the world
won't stop.
The world has had enough LYNDA GRATTON books.
No, you won't
anyway,
stop. If you write to think, you stop writing, you stop thinking. That's just how it's going to be.
Well, perhaps. Let's see.
So, again, Democratic Enterprise, you probably just said, I've got another book now at Prentice Hall FT, here it is, sort of 2-3 years. So it seems to be a little, and subsequently every book has taken you two or 3 years.
Yes, a 2-year process.
That sort of gestation process. Partly based on the research that you've done, partly based on this is the area I want to go into?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first 2 books, Living Strategy and Democratic Enterprise, I was really feeding off the research that had come out of the Leading Edge, because we had extraordinary insights into organizations. I probably could have done more with all of that, but anyway, I didn't. I did the best I could, and then the Exceptional Manager was a bit like the Strategic Human Resource, whatever it's called, Human Resource Management.
Yeah.
That was a co-book, co-edited
Jerry Johnson
book.
Also.
So that came out of a big research grant we got. So my next big book was Hotspots, and that was because I built another consortium which looked at collaboration. So Hotspots and Glow were both about collaboration.
And what I particularly like about these two is that was when you announced this. I'm sure you were doing this work anyway, but the Hotspots movement, you associated the book with a movement, with something people should be doing, and the book is just a part of that. Can you talk me through how
I had this sort of idea of setting up something called the Hotspots Movement, and I did that, and it's now my consulting research program group. It's based in Somerset House. It's now 10 years old. We're always looking for interns, by the way. If anybody who's listening would like to intern with us, just go to our website. And so, I started writing, and the Hotspots was really about what should organizations do. And then Glow, I'd moved to another publisher by then, hadn't I?
No, those were both Apprentice Hall.
Oh, those are both. I thought
Shift was HarperCollins.
Okay, so Glow actually and Hotspots were published first in the US and second. So actually, Berwick Kohler is the publisher of both Hotspots and Glow, but they then used a UK publisher. But the primary, and I moved to Berwick Kohler, who, by the way, are fantastic publishers, and Steve Possianti, who runs Berwick Kohler, in my view, is the best editor I've ever had. Most editors don't do anything at all. I mean, literally.
Berwick Kohler has
nothing.
A fantastic program to encourage authors working with them.
They do. And I would say, I'm not with them anymore because they don't have the sort of reach that I need. But they were the best publishers I've ever worked with. Steve was fantastic. And he actually he was based in California. He used to spend an hour a week talking to me about Hotspots, about how you build a book, about how you think about it, about how you simplify it. Glow I've never really particularly liked. I mean, Glow was written for the US market, specifically to be light, text, toolbox. I wrote.
Self-helpy.
Yeah, it's not. I did it, but I never went back to that. And I don't think I might go back to something a bit more self-help in the future, but it won't be that. But those were written as a pair.
Yeah.
So I wrote Hotspots. Hotspots did pretty well. And so then Steve said, why don't we do something which is really made for individuals in a toolbox way, and that's where Glow came from.
Okay. Then was the shift.
And then I moved into a new phase. Yeah. So the new phase, again, which was the Future of Work Consortium, which by then was really going strong. So Shift was the first book off the block on what's now will be 4 books. I will, by the time this new one comes out, I've written 4 books about the future. So the Shift really looked at everything. And one thing that was interesting about the Shift is I brought personas in for the first time.
Wow. Yes.
I did it in a sort of pretty light way. But I did that again in the 100-Year Life, and that was really important for the 100-Year Life. Yes. And it became even more important for our new book, which is...
So the idea is, here's a person, and these are the things they're going through, and this is how it works, and this is what will happen to them in the future. Yeah,
and again, I haven't looked at the Shift for ages, but those personas, those were light personas. The 100-Year Life actually brought in Jack, Jimmy, and Jane. And then in the next book, we've brought 7 personas in, and we've done a lot more with them than I did with the Shift.
And this is skipping forward a bit because I do want to talk about the key, but the 100-Year Life, one of the amazing things that you do in terms of interactivity is there's this wonderful little quiz where you're saying, tell us your stories, tell us your... Yeah. I'd love to know how that's doing and whether people are actually firing stuff in.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, one thing you've got to think about, and I'm speaking to our listeners now, is that if you build a website, you've got to keep it up to date. You've got to, and that's a bit of a pain when the book's already 2 years old, 3 years old. But we still do that. Tens of thousands of people have filled in that diagnostic.
Wow.
It was really interesting. We wrote an HBR article about what came out of it. So it was never research as such, but it was a good insight into what people were thinking. So yes, I mean, people really like the website. I'm not sure if we're going to do one again. We haven't decided yet. But the 100-Year Life, we branded it because the 100-Year Life has been my most successful book to date.
Wow. So let's just double back a little bit. Shift Future Work is here. So this is you sketching out, these are the areas that the consortium is interested in. And then the key, again, this is almost a back to living strategy. You seem to flip to thinking about corporations and enterprise level and then individuals. So that's a sort of a theme that you...
It is. That's a really good observation. I mean, in general, I've done books in pairs so there's a view that you can't talk about the individual and the organization at the same level because some of your readers want to hear about themselves and some of your readers want to hear about corporations, and they're not the same person. In the new book, let's call it I, Human. It won't be its final name, but that's its working title, I, Human. We actually go from the individual to the corporation, to the government. So we take the whole span. But I can only do that because that's the 4th in that sequence. Yes. So the Shift said, what does it mean for people? And the Key said, what does it mean for corporations? The Key wasn't particularly... The Shift has been much more successful than the Key. And I think partly because the Key was going into a very crowded market and this is one of the things you need to think about when you write a book, which is where does it sit on the bookshelf? When it's being sold, where do they put it? And the Key got put into corporate social responsibility, and it got lost. Yeah. It got lost in corporate social responsibility, and it turns out people aren't really interested in what companies are doing about that. I was a bit surprised about that, but they're not very interested. So the good thing about the Key is it got very well reviewed and it got some prizes, but it didn't sell a lot. Yes. It wasn't particularly influential.
Yes. So this raises a number of issues, all of the things that you've touched on. So your book is a way of thinking. It's a way of getting into a new market. It's a way of addressing different levels of people in the hierarchy of organizations, if you want to say, or governments.
And those you have to think about in advance. I mean, I guess you're going back to the Barrett Kohler advice, but also your own experience. So you're now doing it with the 100-Year Life and I, Human in a much more conscious way.
Not really. I mean, the way that I generally live my life is I only tend to do one thing at a time. I mean, I don't multitask. I sort of write a book. And then when I've written the book, I think, okay, what should we now do with this book? Writing a book is, and I know two years sounds a lot, but it's a very, very intense experience. Our books go through at least 12 complete rewrites. So, in fact, I've just thrown away, and Nigel, my husband, was saying, oh, sweetie, why have you done that? I threw away all my notes, everything, for the new book. Just they all got thrown away yesterday, because it just goes on and on and on. So I just take it as it comes. What I think about my books as when I say my children, I don't mean that in a sort of ridiculous way, but it's the sort of thing, look, you give birth to them, you put them on their feet, and then they do whatever they want. And it's very difficult for you to know what to do with a book. It takes a long time to build up momentum so that people know that you write, they anticipate that you're writing. I have quite a good Twitter following, I have a LinkedIn following. So I haven't actually already started to talk about the new book. I mean, I'm mentioning it today, but we haven't ramped it up in any way. But it's interesting, the book's already sold into the publisher. It sold a month ago. The Japanese rights sold 3 months ago, but it will not hit the bookshelves for at least another year. And that's because the publishers need a year. And people think, well, does it take that long to print it? Of course it doesn't. But it takes a year to position what they think is going to be a big book. And the view is that I, Human, which won't be that name, will be a big book. And it takes a year to position a big book. So we're going to start working on positioning it within the next month.
Yes. The entrepreneurs, businessmen, specialists thinking about writing their own book, quite a lot of them are going to be thinking about self-publishing. That's not something you've ever thought of.
No. And we've talked about it. I have an agent now. So I started having an agent after Glow. So after Glow, I went to Caroline Michelle at PFD, who's the best agent there is. And what she did, which is really important and we haven't spoken about yet, is foreign rights.
Yes.
So if you look at most of certainly the last 3 books, they've sold more outside of the UK than they have inside.
Mm-hmm. Japan is big.
100-Year Life has sold up to 500,000 copies in Japan. It has become the best-selling book in Japan. Not the best-selling business book, the best-selling book. It's been made into a manga. It's just gone crazy. So selling the rights is really important. And it's a surprise, so for example, the 100-Year Life has done incredibly well in Japan, but hardly at all in Korea. And you don't know that beforehand. And that's why, getting your rights sold both to America and to, in our case, the Spanish rights, all the translations that have gone through, that's an important point.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to do that without an agent.
Yeah. The London Book Fair was last month, and,
yes.
and so we were there as well. We were very, very lucky in that in a previous life, I wrote a book on packaging design, so we have German, Spanish, American rights, and they just keep bringing in residual income for
well, I've
ages
never seen a book as a way of making money, actually.
Yes.
And it's only really with the 100-Year Life that we've made any money. But, having said that, by the time the agent's taken their cut and the sub-agent's taken their cut and this has taken their cut and that's taken the cut, even a book that sold 500,000 would not keep me in the manner to which I've become accustomed, sadly.
So books are not an end in themselves. The books have to do something, and you've done a range of different things, but all around research and the consortia and generating visibility for what you do and for the consortia. What other reasons?
Yeah, I'm a professor at the London Business School, so part of my role there is to be a thought leader. And for me, thought leadership is writing books. What's really interesting about the 100-Year Life, I met somebody this morning for coffee who's the head of strategy for one of our biggest companies in the UK. She said, it's transformed the way I've thought. And she said, you need to know that there's another company, which I won't mention, where every single person has read the book. It's been really influential. You know, I went on the Japanese Prime Minister's council because he read the book. So books, the purpose that books sell is that if you're interested in people listening to your ideas, then books are a good way of doing that. And for me, I mean, I love making things. I've always loved making things. I mean, I used to sew. In fact, I talk about patchwork in one of my books. I love cooking. I love making homes. So for me, the making a book is another way. It's a craft. So for me, it's a craft. And the fact that it then sells and people buy it and people read it is great. But I would imagine, if you notice, I've never... You know, some of my books didn't do so well. Some of them did really well. Doesn't make me feel differently about them. No. I don't really mind what people say about the books. I mean, I was really upset we didn't get the FT Business Book of the Year award because we were very near to winning that. And that was a shame. And I was sad about that. And I was sad about it for the book because I thought the book was really good and people had, you know, said the book's really good. So it did win lots of other prizes, but it didn't win that one. But, you know, I write because I love writing. It's a craft. It's what I do.
Tell me a little bit about collaborating. I mean, the Exceptional Manager was 3 people writing the academic work, strategic human resource management, as you say, different voices. But this one, to have the impact that it has,
yes,
you and Andrew must really get on in some way, or you must hate each other, and that's why it's so great. How does that work?
Well, we really adore each other, which is why we've now written another book together. And I think... the reason it worked is that we have complementary knowledge and complementary skills. So I don't think, but I'm not sure about this, I don't think I could write a book with someone who's got the same knowledge base as I've got, because we'd be scrambling to say, well, who knows about what? But actually, you know, it is possible to spot in the 100-Year Life the pieces that Andrew will have led and the pieces that I will have led. Having said that, we then do so much, you know, stitching and polishing, and that actually you can't see it at the very end. Yeah. But in fact, there were chapters where he took the lead and chapters where I took the lead. And certainly the book we've just finished, we definitely took the lead in different chapters. But then we spend a lot of time just polishing it. And we use those metaphors. I mean, we say, you know, in fact, it would have been nice to talk to both of us together. You know, we have a piece of stone, we're sort of chopping away at it, we get the broad thing, and then we start polishing. And that polishing just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. So I've really liked it. And actually, I probably shouldn't have thrown them away, but when we meet, I'm you know, because I'm a note taker, I write usually 12 pages of notes from every single conversation we've had. I've just thrown them all away. And then we start again. So for us, it's not the writing, the conversations we've had have been the really important creative mechanism. And I hope that when you see the next book, you'll see us in an even more creative mode, an even more creative, because what the 100-Year Life did is, because it did so well, both intellectually and, you know, with the readers, that is, it gave us a lot of confidence. And we went in and said, okay, we're now going to write the best book there is about the future. And, you know, I think that's what we've done.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to that. And you're right, I want to talk to Andrew, but pinning the two of you down together, come on, give me a break.
I know,
that's just not going to work.
He's not here in the country right now.
So let me just pick up two or three themes. You've worked with an agent, you publish with a publisher. It's partly to think, partly to explore the work that you're currently doing. It's about visibility for your ideas, subsequently for you, for the Hotspots movement as well.
And for London Business School.
Because it's, you know, clearly there. And I think the Exceptional Manager was, you know, also a significant promotion for the institutions that you were all with at that time.
Yeah.
So trying to distill that out, if you were to look back now at the living strategy, Lynda Gratton, what do you know now that you wish you'd known then?
I don't think there was anything really. I mean, I tend not to look back, actually, and I tend not to say I wish I did. I mean, I think that it's a craft. I mean, I've learned how to write a book now. I sort of had an idea about it with Living Strategy. I'm better at it now. And actually, I do a lot of coaching. You know, I coach a lot of people about writing their book. Well, not a lot, but, you know, a small number of people. I know now how to write a book. I don't know how to write the world's greatest book, but I certainly know how to write a book. So there's nothing I would have done differently. I think it's a process and you just have to do it. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. It's like any process. You know, people come to me and say, I'd really like to write a book. Could you help me? And I say, yeah. And then I say to them, I should perhaps not be telling you this. I then say, send me 3 pages, which summarizes the book. Do you know what proportion of people do that?
100%.
Yeah. It's not even that. And nobody's ever done that. So lots of people like to talk about writing a book. And I don't have any problem with that. I don't have any problem with people talking about writing a book. But it's not the same as writing a book. And writing a book is about getting up every morning at 6 o'clock for 4 hours for a year. That's what writing a book means. I mean, it's a really tough thing to do. And this one has been unbelievably tough because we want it to be unbelievably good. And it's hard to write a good book.
And you've also got the day job to carry on with, and you have so many day jobs. I mean, the movement, London Business School, all the other bits and pieces. You're speaking on stages around the world all the time. But it helps to be known as an author.
Oh yes, I mean it's my calling card. And I don't mean that because I'm not transactional actually as a person. So I don't write books because that means I get paid more as a speaker. Yeah. That's not the reason.
No.
I write books because actually, honestly, it's incredibly time consuming to write a book. And if you added every hour that I spend, I must be the lowest paid person there is, you know, on an hourly basis. Yeah. So I do it because that's what I do. Yes. I mean, sometimes I love writing, sometimes I hate it, but that's basically what I haven't found anything else to do yet. When I do, I'm hoping I'll be able to stop writing. But at the moment, that's all I do. And so it's not really it's not a transaction. It's just I have a set of ideas about the world. You know, the more that you write, the more people talk to me, the more you learn, the more you grow, the better you get. And I'm honestly at the top of my game right now, and it's because of the hours that I've put into getting my ideas straight in my mind.
The 3 pages that you ask people to do, why is it people don't respond with anything?
I don't know. I think writing a book is hard, and I think it's very nice to say that you're writing a book. I think that's a lovely thing to say, or I've got a book in my mind, but most people don't. And it's because it's hard to write a book and it's hard to write a good book. So I don't criticize anyone for not doing it, but that would be my observation.
Thank you so much. I've had a blast. You are on to your next meeting anytime now, but thank you so much.
Well, it's a Pilates, actually.
Well, that's an important...
If I'm going to live to 100, I've got to keep fit.
I'm trying to come onto the main camera and failing miserably.
Lynda Gratton, we first met and...
Get off. So, I hope you took lots of notes. I have taken pages after pages of notes. I don't know where you go from here following that advice. I think the things that really speak to me are the ideas about writing books as thought leadership and the process of writing and thinking. Absolutely inspiring for me. A couple of thoughts I would just sort of pick up on with you while we still are here. Clearly, she loves writing. Right at the beginning, she said she loves writing, and I suppose the question I have for you is: do you love writing? Because if you don't actually love the practice of writing, then you need to think of another way of getting the words out, whether you use Siri and actually dictate the book, whether you create a series of questions and have someone ask you and then you speak out the ideas in your book and record them and do it that way. We'll talk more about that in other sessions. The idea of writing to think we'll come back to again. Some practical ideas, read for covers of your book if you have any interest over the design. Some really ideas about the revenue from a book. A book clearly for Lynda is a labor of love. It's not necessarily something that is going to generate on its own a lot of money. Even selling 500,000 copies in Japan, that was the first time she and Andrew had made any significant revenues. And then there were all the agents taking their cut of that. So your book, to my way of thinking, your book has to be a means to an end. It has to achieve something else, whether serving your business or serving your consulting practice or your entrepreneurial self, whatever it is that you do in the real world to generate revenues. Steve Piasanti, we've got an interview with him. It's an awesome interview, and we'll close the summit with that at the end of tomorrow. So make sure that you subscribe, get the notifications, because then you'll hear when that is coming out. If you're watching this on the replay, then go straight and watch the Steve Piasanti interview now. He is amazing. What else? This idea of creating research consortia to generate your unique IP, your own intellectual material. Thought leaders, there's 3 pillars of thought leadership. There's research, there's writing about that research and getting the message out through writing, and then there's speaking or talking, certainly sharing that information in a broader sense. If you are a thought leader, if sharing your knowledge is part of what you do, then please join us on our LinkedIn group for entrepreneurs and executives. It's called Thought Leadership Group for Entrepreneurs and Experts, and we'd love to have you. So check that out on LinkedIn. If you can't find it, because I think sometimes it's quite tricky to find these groups, drop me a message and I will invite you in. I love the idea too of creating anticipation for the books that you write. If you go with a mainstream publisher, you will have this gap once you finish the book of at least a year and perhaps longer before it actually comes out. So here's an interesting point. If you are thinking you need to get this message out now, it is a timely book. Not an evergreen topic like living longer. If yours is a timely book, it's focused on an industry or a technology and you want to get it out now, then you really should be considering self-publishing or working with a mainstream publisher who will work much faster. So that also, if time is of the essence to your business idea or to the idea behind the book, then you should consider self-publishing. Foreign rights, we've sold rights into Spain, Germany, the US. We're based in the UK. We've had a book translated into Mandarin that sold very, very well. That was Leadership Unplugged. So I can absolutely support Lynda on that. But even so, it takes a while to negotiate those deals, and we did that through our publishers, Palgrave Macmillan, and Van Nostrand Reinhold. So that's possible, but it's not something that I would urge you to consider in the early stages because it's just an added layer of complexity. Let's get the book out first. Let's build a profile for you as a writer, as a thought leader, and then work to, as Lynda said, build on the confidence from writing your first book. She threw her notes away. I can't believe that. She threw her notes away. I mean, my heart sinks, partly because I never throw anything away, but also because I used to teach media law. And if there's a legal issue that comes up, I hope Lynda, please don't throw your notes away in future. Don't, guys, people, just keep your notes. You never know what kind of reaction there's going to be. Maybe, honestly, you made a genuine mistake and you need to be able to track that back. So please don't throw your notes away, even though Lynda Gratton said it. Facepalm. She doesn't look back clearly. And these final few thoughts at the end that when she's coaching people to write, and she asks them to articulate in 3 pages, what's the purpose of your book, which is a very good mechanism. We have this process called a book audit where we help people figure out what's the title, who's the audience, who's the first 100 people that you'd want to write it for. But if you can't articulate the concept for your book, the idea for your book in very short measure, then there's no point in starting. You need a really clear, focused idea to save you time down the line, and so that you don't go off down all these tributaries and wrong tracks. So think about how you can focus your idea and talk to me about that. I've got a couple of frameworks and a process can help you frame your idea. I don't want to go into page 3 because otherwise we'll be here forever. But the final 2 thoughts from Lynda. She wrote 100-Year Life 4 hours a day for a year. No, not the 100-Year Life. That's the new one, the new long life. I Human, she was calling it when we did the interview. 4 hours a day for a year. So if you want to write a book that is this size, then that is really strong. And we're talking small text, small type here. I'm showing it to the other camera that I can't get on. I'm an idiot. Small type, 300-400 pages. That's not necessary these days. And in fact, when we talk to Steve Piasanti, you'll see that we're seeing a lot of people write books of 20, 30,000 words, which are much, much slimmer volume. And book as a calling card. If you are someone who meets important people, if you want introductions to people, a book is a very, very powerful calling card and lasts and sits on people's shelves for a long time. So it can be a very, very powerful, practical tool for you. So that's pretty much all I have to say on Lynda Gratton. Post any questions and comments. I'll pick them up at the end of today in the final wrap up. In the next session, which will start on the hour at 10 o'clock UK time, British Summer Time, we'll be interviewing VERNE Harnish, who's the founder of the Entrepreneurs Organization. And he really has done a fantastic job of work of getting his message out there and attracting new clients by giving books away, completely 180 degrees opposite from Lynda Gratton's approach. So he takes the entire self-publishing route because it gives him total control and allows him to very pragmatically, in a very transactional way, to build his audience and his customers for the services of their training and consulting business. So come back for that, take a quick break, grab a snack, grab a sleeping bag because you're here for the duration, right? And I will pick up with you at 10 o'clock. Take care. I'll speak to you again soon. Matrix. Oh, here we go. That work. Let me tidy up.